But getting people to make the Olympic Games is bread and butter. We are an elite setup. We're a high-performance centre, and we are set up to try and make people win the Olympics, because the Olympics is as good as it gets in rowing. We've got 138 Olympic medals to date in the club, and everything about the club is set up to try and, if an athlete has the potential, what can we do to support that athlete to get there?
Hi, and welcome to the There's Another Way podcast with me, Adam Halverson.
And me, Pete Dolby. And you've come to the place where each episode we'll be shining a light on authentic people who have chosen an alternative path to their new normal to find another way. Today we're joined by Ali Brown, an elite rowing coach who's dedicated to shaping hopefuls for Olympic glory. We delve into his journey that took him from rowing a squeaky, battered boat as a child to sharing the water with some of the greatest rowers of all time. Actually, scrub that, one of the greatest Olympians of all time. Ali's passion for his sport and inspiring others shines through in this conversation. We hope you enjoy it as much as we do. Before we jump in, if you are enjoying our There's Another Way podcast, please do share with your friends if you think they'll enjoy it. We started our podcast as Adam and I share a passion for inspiring stories, and we've always said, look, if one of our guests inspires one single person, then it's all worthwhile, and you can help us spread the word, or we'd be really super grateful. Please do also subscribe to our show on your platform so that you don't miss another episode when they're published. And finally, if you're feeling generous and you're enjoying our content, you could always help us with a small contribution which would go to help paying for our audio equipment and studio hire, etc. And again, we would be so very grateful. If you head to buymeacoffee.com/There's Another Way, there you'll find our page, and look, every little helps, and we thank you so much for your support. Right, on with the show. The way we do it, isn't it? So yeah, good. All right, well, here we are. Delighted to be joined today by Mr. Ali Brown. Thanks for coming and spending some time with us today, Ali. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Brilliant. So we probably just set the scene. We probably only got to know each other a few weeks ago because we had a common race we were running for last weekend, which is well documented, so I won't bang on about that. But the legs all recovered from the marathon last week? Yeah,
just about. I haven't done much exercise this week. I've done quite the opposite. I've had a few beers and a few bags of crisps, but well deserved.
Brilliant. Well done on that fantastic effort. You've been exercising the arm this week in the pub, which sounds fantastic. Yeah, very good. So yeah, really enjoyed obviously getting to know you a little bit in the last few weeks, and thanks for agreeing to come in and talk about your world of elite rowing.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, where do we start? I guess the most important start is how I found the sport of rowing, really. Not to take your first question away, but it's a pretty obvious one, because I grew up in a rowing family. My grandparents even rowed, but most importantly to me, my parents rowed, and my father taught me to row, and kind of owe everything to them, really, to introduce me to that sport. I'm from a little town in Wiltshire called Bradford-on-Avon, and rowing was like what the family did. It was. At times you forgot there was other members of the club other than the Brown family. I'm one of five, and with friends, and you can see how that group just gets bigger and bigger. We just went everywhere as a pack. So the Brown family was a big part of Bradford-on-Avon Rowing Club. So it was like a social, really.
And all your siblings rowed as well?
Yeah. So my mum only rowed for a little bit, and she won. It's called your novices. It's your first ever race. It's, you win your novices and you get your first pot. Ultimately means you've won a race, and you win your novices. And my mum did that. There's photos of her doing that. But my dad is always. He's really into it. He still rows all the time now. He was captain of the rowing club. He does a huge amount and volunteers and teaches kids to row now. He works with local schools, and so it's in the blood. And I started coxing, steering the boat. I mean, not long after, I could walk really. I mean, you've got to be older because you've got to be responsible for being on a river. But certainly from age 8 and 9, I was getting in the boat. And I first went to compete at Henley Royal Regatta when I was 11.
Wow.
11 years old, steering the boat. At Henley Regatta, it's world famous. Instead of having, the things that float on the water are called buoys, the buoyancy things, they don't have them at Henley Royal Regatta. They have big wooden posts. So you can see the obvious difference. If you hit a little plastic floating buoy, it's not going to do much damage. But if you hit one of the wooden, they're called booms at Henley, the oar snaps and the crew sinks.
Time for a new boat.
So no pressure or anything.
Yeah. Wow, 11 as well. Fantastic.
Yeah. And so what was the real origin? It was you mentioned it was your parents, but was it grandparents even before that, or what was the real origin?
I think I can't definitely say it goes back past my great grandparents, but just I don't really know why we're into that sport so much. I can't explain it. It's just what the family always did. Look, it's pretty obvious that you don't really row unless there's a river near you. It's pretty fundamental. So we were in a town that had a river flowing through it, Bradford-on-Avon. There was a local rowing club, and I spent so many years just watching my parents do it, watching my brothers do it. I've got twin sisters, 2 brothers. So it's a bit like being a younger one when the older ones play football. You're dragged along watching. So I was dragged along watching everybody running around in nappies. So it was only inevitable it was going to be in the blood.
So it really was just from day one. It was just that thing that was always around. Yeah.
Weekends were going away to races. All around the country. It was very inspirational, It was we were brought up being fit and healthy was a big part of our life. We weren't really computer game kids. If sometimes you come home from school without obviously get your homework done, but no plans, and somebody would go, well, I'm going to go and do some weights, or somebody would say I'm going to go for a run, or somebody would say, oh, I'm actually going to go rowing. You just go, sounds like I'll do that. So most nights was doing some sort of fitness, because I kind of idolised my big brothers really and my sisters. So, if they were going to go and do something, I'd just go and join them. So
you just following their footsteps almost.
Yeah.
And what was the dream as a little kid? Was it to become a professional rower, or was it just something you did as a hobby? Or
I say little kid. So when I was 13 years old, I had a very influential guy in my life, he was called Barry Taylor. Now, Barry was just one of the rowers at the local club, but you're going to laugh here, but we weren't really brought up to think there was much life outside of the town, and that's not a criticism of the family or anything. It's just not many of us had really branched out. We had a family business which was selling fruit and vegetables, and all the family worked in their uncles and a lot of family, and it wasn't that our destiny was to carry on with that family business all the time, but a lot of people in the town, no one really left that much. God, that sounds awful, but we met Barry, and Barry was really keen. I think he wanted to do his own rowing, but he also loved the sport, and he saw some talent in me rowing, and he said, well, I'd like to take you to the national championships. And I remember laughing, and what the hell is that? That sounds a bit scary. And he drove me to Nottingham, which was a bloody long way away. And he put me on the start next to all these very serious looking big people. And I was racing in the year below. Sorry, the year above. So everyone was obviously equally bigger than me, because they were a year older than me as well, because there was no event for a 13-year-old. It starts at 14. But he wanted to take me just to show me what it was like.
Excuse my ignorance, is this you in a boat on your own, or is it
pairs, this was me on my own,
okay,
rowing in a boat, yeah. And so he took me all the way to Nottingham, and there's a really funny little memory I have, actually. It was a really hot day, and I don't think I'd drunk enough, so my gums stuck to my teeth. had no moisture in my mouth, and my boat squeaked as well because everyone had these really amazing boats, and my boat was a piece of crap. I think it belonged to my dad back in the day. Anyway, so they all had these amazing boat, and I remember my gums were stuck to my mouth and my boat was going anyway, I managed to make the final, and that ranked me, must be in the top 6 of the country as a year below everyone else as well. So that was quite exciting.
That sounds pretty accelerated. Or was there a lead up to this where Barry had got to know, like, from the local stuff?
Yeah, I guess so. And I'm just saying, like, if we move on and I don't go, he was a massive ignition into me realising that I could do something in sport.
Give you the belief that
So, and you said you met him at 13. Did you say?
Yeah, it must have been around that. Right. I actually think he might have been one of the boats that I coxed, when I was really young. So he was around. But anyway, so then he thought there was something in it for, because he wanted to carry on the sport, but maybe more in a coaching role. And then the rest was history, really. We went back a year later, and we won gold, and we won gold the next year and the next year. So it was pretty cool. And if it wasn't for him, I don't know where I'd done that. And
it was mainly, like Pete said, it was mainly the singles the whole time that you did.
Well, I had no one else to row with because it's only a little town. I could have rowed with my brothers, but I would be competing in an adult category, whereas I was only 14. So
yeah.
There was no one my age to row with.
And what was the kind of distance that you're rowing in those events? Is it?
I think it's so the Olympic distance that people compete in is 2,000, but this was because you were only little. I think it was half the course.
Yeah.
So that was a bloody long way for me.
Yeah.
I remember thinking that was like a marathon, but looking back on it now, it was only supposed to have been a sprint.
Yeah. And so what makes, you obviously had talent at this stage because Barry had seen it in you, but what makes a talented rower? Is it the fact that you've been, you've been subjected to it all your life and you just did it every week? Was it the longevity of actually practicing it? Or is it the strength? Is it the mindset?
No, I think I was naturally strong as a young lad.
Yeah.
I played football to quite a high level as well. I had to make a decision whether to play football or go rowing.
Was that a difficult choice?
Yeah, I think it was actually. I was playing for Bristol City at the time.
Okay.
I probably wouldn't have made it if I'm honest. There's so many good football players around, but at that point I was playing for Bristol City. I see holding my own a little bit. My parents had to drive to Bristol, which was probably about an hour, and in traffic worse, twice a week, and if we had a match at the weekend. And I knew it was quite a burden on everybody. So that helped the decision to knock rowing on the head because it was, and that's not to make my parents feel guilty or anything. That was a lot of effort, I
was going to say though, do you think they would have rather you'd got into rowing or were they supportive whatever you did?
Well, listen, I made a career out of it, as we'll talk about probably in a minute. So I haven't made the wrong decision. I guess there's always an element of could I have made it? But like I alluded to, I doubt it.
If I remember correctly, you were a goalkeeper, right?
No.
Why did I think that? Sorry.
I was the general in midfield.
Brilliant.
And my memory of how I played is so much better than I actually did.
Yeah, but when you say Bristol City, you were proper in their kids sort of.
Yeah. No, I was. A highlight of my football actually, and. I did actually get invited to go up and do some England schoolboy trial. Wow. And my mum took me up to this place, and this was very close to me quitting actually. We had this England trial, and I thought I played pretty well. And after the game, everyone had to go and put their suits back on. I think I'd borrowed my dad's suit, and they go up, put us all in a room, and they listed out all the people who were needed to stay, and I wasn't on the list. And I remember thinking, that was brutal. Basically, stand up and leave if you've not been called out.
Yeah, so that's harsh, isn't it?
And that was pretty near the end. And actually, I couldn't, if I'm being honest, I couldn't really understand their logic because everyone thinks they're better than they are, right? That's just, a bit of confidence. But I really thought I played pretty well in that game.
I was going to say, but you also know, when you've played well in the scheme.
I had a good game in that, and I was genuinely pretty chuffed. I remember the referees walking off with me and saying, "Oh, well done. You should be all right, shouldn't you?" And at that moment, I thought, "Oh, maybe I have just done quite well." And then just to be not on the list, and there was no one gave me feedback or anything like that. It was just you just weren't picked. Anyway, doesn't matter.
Must have been an amazing experience for you at that age, though. I'm just envisaging a midfield general running around with squeaky teeth and the guns.
Yeah, squeaky teeth.
Was there any skill sets that you used? Obviously, they're quite different sports, but was there any skill sets that you kind of used in rowing that you could transfer over to football? Was it the aerobic capability, or was it a mindset thing, or was there anything that you could transfer over, or were they just completely independent?
No, it was just a misspent youth staying out till it got dark kicking football against.
Well, that's what we did, right, as kids. Yeah. I did the same.
It was just epic. I just hope my kids do. I guess they're a little bit young, 10 and 12, because you don't want them out till dark now. But they're getting close to that age where you've got to call them in for dinner. And but I just hang out with my mates after school, and we play football. The World Cup. I think some people call it Wembley when you got a group of people, you score, you go through to the next round, or headers and volleys or whatever. We just play football all the time.
Yeah, I did. I hated going goal, but I used to love doing that as well. But I mean, I know it's a romantic notion, but there were far fewer distractions in those days, I think, when we were kids. I mean, the kids just have so much competing for their attention span these days. It'd be interesting to see if they have the same enthusiasm and devotion to a sport like that, I think.
Yeah. Who knows? But yeah, it was pretty cool. You're making me reminisce now.
Yeah.
It was quite simple back then, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Was the other members of your family all kind of in elite sport, or was it?
So my eldest brother James, he actually went on. He rowed in the senior Great Britain team. He was really good. So he was very different to me. He won't mind me saying if he listens to this, he wasn't such a good footballer, but he's got a real mental toughness. He's really strong, mentally tough, and he used to, I think when he was at school, he used to go running with the teachers in the lunch hours, and he was always really fit, and he still stays pretty fit now. So his was much more about the determination and the toughness, and obviously he had a lot of physiology as well, but he wasn't so coordinated with the football and stuff. But my second brother Simon, he was a brilliant footballer. He actually had trials and stuff at Southampton, and he was a very, very good sports person and a very good rower as well. He's somebody who didn't go on and do the GB stuff, but he is equally talented, and he could have if he wanted to. My sisters were dancers, and they were in one of them an actress and a singer, but they were always doing dancing and aerobics and other stuff. So it was definitely, we're a very active family.
I was going to say, it sounds like there's a real mentality and a mindset that's obviously coming potentially just through maybe the history of rowing. I don't know what you think, but it sounds like across your family there's a real attitude towards sport. Yeah,
but I wouldn't say. Okay, so this is where somebody might laugh out loud at this, but I'd say we're not that competitive as a family. I think we're quite individually competitive. That we're all striving to try and do stuff and do it as well as we can. But I don't think it's definitely not a family which couldn't play Monopoly without a fight. No, not at all. Quite the opposite. I think we'd struggle to find anyone that cares about who won, because we're all going to have a glass of wine and laugh. But we're all quite competitive with what we're trying to do individually, or what we want our kids to do. But not an unhealthy competition in the family. Saying that, when I used to go running with my brothers, I think if I was ever going to beat my brothers, I might get an elbow in the ribs, and I knew my place and I'd back down. But that's cool. That's growing up with older brothers, right?
Family pecking order, yeah. So it's fascinating. So you won a couple of golds. You said in the Nottingham. You went back a couple of years. So then what happened after? So
I did the national stuff. There's 2 events every year with the national title. There's one, the National Schools Championships. That's earlier in the year because The later one, the national championships, that's predominantly more for clubs and stuff. But the national schools one, that's probably the really big one. I didn't realise that at the time. But that's because the Eatons, the Radley and everyone are in term time. So that's the big one for all the schools. It made no difference for my category because a lot of the people who did the single scull were from club backgrounds anyway. And not many of the top schools did the small boats because they were all about putting an 8 together, which is the biggest class and the blue ribbon event, really. But yeah, so I did that twice a year from 14 to probably 16, and I won quite a few national titles there. And then when it's called junior, and it's ultimately sixth form, 17, 18, and then you can compete that's your first opportunity to really try and represent Great Britain in your age group. So I did that first when I was 16, and I made something called the Coupe de la Jeunesse, which is like a European little event, and that was quite nice. Got to wear a top with a GB flag on it. Wow. And then the next year I went to the World Championship. So the Coupe is like the kind of like a B team. There's a bit of a taster. But then the next year was the World Championships for under 18s, and I got a bronze medal in that.
And where was that?
That was in Austria, and anywhere we went, my parents went as well, which was amazing. And probably if that doesn't come across now, the support they've given us. I ran London Marathon last weekend. My parents still came to watch.
Amazing.
It's amazing. So, yeah. So that's cool. And then I guess moving into the big boy stuff, I moved to a rowing club in Henley, which is Leander Club, and they were just amazing for me. They gave me accommodation when I needed it. They gave me food when I needed it.
How did you move to the Leander Club? Did they approach you, or did you approach them?
On that particular time, they sounded me out a little bit about what would you like to do. I think I had different options about whether I was going to go. Because I got half good at rowing, I started to get some offers for scholarships. I think, Wycliffe College, which is in Gloucestershire, they gave me a full scholarship, and that was a real moment, whether I went down that route or. And then the other option was moving to row at Leander Club alongside Steve Redgrave, James Cracknell, and all those guys.
Well, that'll do it.
And I was like, and I remember going, and I don't really have to do schoolwork. And I'm like, no. But Jürgen, who was the very, very famous East German rowing coach, who's coached Redgrave and Pinson to several, he was pretty keen that I did some college work. So I got on a course at Henley College, and just whatever I could be on.
I was going to ask, sort of, where does education and school fit in through this journey? So I guess in the junior years, you were obviously staying local, and you just stayed at your local school.
School, yeah.
Okay. And then so obviously when it progressed, it was a case of this is what I'm doing. You almost had in your head. 16, 17, it was... Okay, so I don't have any regrets about the academics, but I can totally see that as a parent, I would have probably questioned it a little bit, just leaving school a bit early. But what I would say is the network it put me in, and the things that I've achieved as a consequence of being in that place and rowing with those people, and I didn't feel like my life was going to be dictated by my GCSEs at that point. Absolutely, and I guess your parents at that point, probably because you were doing the family sport, were they at the time? Because I've been through this with my family with my brother's tennis, because obviously he moved to America at a very young age, similar vibe, but I think because when you're getting to British level, it's kind of like we're on a different path. Do you think that's how your parents felt, or were they?
Yeah, I think they kind of knew that I wasn't the most academic anyway. That wasn't what floated my boat, and I got an offer of a lifetime to go and row with these people.
Yeah.
And I snapped it up. And I'm glad I did, really, because actually some of those years that I'm talking about, the early years where you always think that it's going to lead to bigger and better things, actually those years were the best. They, as probably allude to, I didn't quite live up to the standards which I think I probably could have moved into, because I had a really big decision to make after I got that third in the world at the World Championships rowing in a 4. They were all a lot bigger than me, so actually on the podium getting the medal, so they'll reel somebody out to give the medals, and he walks down the crew. You have to stand in line, and it was a coxed 4, and I was on the end, and this time I wasn't the cox, but I was smaller than the cox, and the other guys in the boat like 6'5", and they're all absolutely massive, and they get to me, and the guy thinks I'm the cox and tells me to stand on the end, and I'm like, yeah. So it's inevitable on next bit. I'm not as big as everyone else, but when I was really young, I was basically this size when I was about 15, and I stopped growing, and I had to. There's a category in rowing, lightweight category. So there's lightweight and there's heavyweight. Although, if I don't get a chance to say it, lightweight is sort of moving out a little bit now, because the Olympics are bringing in so many different sports. They're taking out things like lightweight rowing and stuff, and just having rowing.
Right.
So because they've got to make way for other events like
golf
and
skateboarding.
What else? Skateboarding. Yeah.
But how
juggling.
Fascinating in terms of how it was coming into a club that had Sir Steve Redgrave and James Cracknell in it. I mean, what was that?
So yeah, that was really cool. I mean, that was really cool. I remember I got quite a funny story about Steve Redgrave, actually. So I got invited on my first training camp, and he, for some reason, different ends of the spectrums. He probably doesn't even remember me right back then, but I definitely remembered him. And I was sitting at the table with all these big heavyweights, and one of them said, "Does your food smell?" And I went down to sniff it, and of course my face was shoved in my food. And I remember I probably only had my head in my food for about half a second, but I basically. But I remember it being like 30 seconds of composing with my head in gravy and going, all right, take a deep breath, come up, laugh, it's really funny. And then, but I was laughing, don't worry, I can take a joke. But they shoved my head in my food. And I remember thinking, well, I'm going to get my own back. I'm definitely getting my own back. And I said to somebody, oh, I think this ice cream's off. And I went to shove this 6'9", probably 6'9" is an exaggeration, but there's some absolute monster of a person tried to shove his head in his food, and I pushed, and his head didn't even move, and he literally looked around and we went, yes, good luck, good try.
So what was the environment like? Because I guess if you're in, it sounds like a very elite environment. So there's competition, obviously. What was, especially for a 16, 17-year-old, I guess, moved away from home? Oh,
yeah. So that was a big part of it. I moved away from home when I was 17. But I was very well looked after by the club. And then I left the amazing work that Barry did with me, and I moved to work with a guy called Mark Hatley. And Mark Hatley took me under his wing and did a very similar job to what Barry did, but just a few years later. And he's much more than just a rowing coach. He'd make sure I was okay, and as you would do of a young kid living away. And he coached me. He was a very good rowing coach as well. So he did a lot for me in those early years as well. But yeah, living away from home and having to cook for yourself and stuff at such a young age. It's inevitable, right? You're just going to empty a tin of baked beans on toast. Yeah. And I just made sure that I just didn't do that every night.
Were you the only one at that age coming into this, or was there like an intake?
No, I was. I mean, there was a group of young people, but because of it wasn't normal for somebody my age to row full time. It wasn't normal, and I'm not even sure it was totally right. But it was. I spent a lot of time with the adults, and actually, it was that group. There was times it was the four that won in Sydney. Steve Redgrave, Matthew Pince and James Cracknell and those guys and myself, that it was quite funny. It was like those guys and me, and I was always the little kid that was around, and I kind of watched them train and thought, well, if I want to get good, I need to do that. Quietly cracking away. And then I've sort of gone off the point, but I had to then move to lightweight. So as a under 18, I was about 88 kilos, and I was trying to eat as much as I could, and then I realised there's no way I can do this, so I had to lose a lot of weight. And
when you say there's no way you could do this,
there's no way I can compete with the
monsters,
who were pulling 30 seconds better on a rowing machine, and there's so much more power, and in rowing you need levers being long arms and legs, so your reach and stuff is really important. So I made a decision to become a lightweight, and now there is so much support for somebody making that decision, or there's so many ways you can have support, but at that point there wasn't really that around. So in many ways I was a bit of a trailblazer really for let's not do what Ali Brown did, because I basically lost it all in about 7 weeks over the summer. I actually did go to a trial and do amazingly well, but I think that was short term. And then I was just too hungry. I was getting dizzy all the time, and I just didn't do it properly, really. I needed proper advice. You realise now as an adult, you want to go on a diet, right? You eat a little bit healthier. There are nice things out there you can eat that fill you up, that aren't fattening. Basically, I just ate the same stuff as I did before, but just had half of it. And training 2 to 3 times a day, that doesn't work. And I basically just got myself more and more knackered, and I ended up getting a glandular fever, and I was out for about 6 months. Wow. And then I did come back and went to several under 23s and did some senior stuff. But yeah, it was never as exciting as when I was full pelt. I was just hungry quite a lot of the time.
What was the weight threshold for lightweight?
Had to be 70 kilos in the summer, and my last race. So I did do some cool stuff. Like I've cut out, a decade there, as in from 98, 99 to 2005, 6. Yeah. So there was a lot of good times. The racing as a lightweight international, under 23 seniors, and made some world finals, but it never really lived up to the potential that I did have. And I was just a bit frustrated, really. In the winter you could be 75 kilos, and at 75 kilos I could do it, and I did some really good stuff at 75 kilos. And then I might get selected for a world championships. And one of the reasons I stepped back from it is because I just felt that when my weight went down to like 68 kilos or 69 kilos in the summer, because it's an average of 70, so there might be,
that's light,
really light, really, really light. And when I had to race down there, I just knew I was crap. I was too hungry. I had no energy, and I did a few years of that, but actually I felt like I was letting people I really thought a lot of, who I was racing with, I was letting them down because I didn't have the energy. So I quickly...
But, sorry to interrupt, but it basically sounds like you were shafted by a weight limit, effectively, a little bit.
But that was the options. The options were to do lightweight or do heavyweight, and I went for the lighter one because it was...
But it sounds like you were right on the middle.
Yeah, no, I was. I'm basically, if there was a weight category for 80 kilos, I'm your man.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's like in boxing. Yeah, how many weight divisions have you got? It's crazy.
Yeah.
So it sounds. I mean,
but it's not as big a sport as boxing, really, is it? There's still loads of it's. And I don't. I'm not bitter at all. This is not me being bitter about it at all. There's life gives you a few curveballs and you learn by them. Maybe I wouldn't be. Because I mean, we'll move to it. But now I'm a coach, and that's what I do. And maybe I wouldn't been where I am now if my rowing had been so plain sailing, because I really had to work at stuff and I really had to evaluate things, and I just didn't really want to carry on hitting my head against a brick wall for 5 more years to have the same result. And also, life's pretty dull when you don't eat. It really is. I was going to bed very early and pretending I wasn't hungry, and you haven't got the energy to go and do things. My rowing career was fantastic, and there's not much I would change, but it was very hungry and miserable sometimes.
Just before we go into the coaching side, I'd be fascinated when you just casually dropped in there that you joined the Sir Steve Redgrave and Matthew Pinson, and you joined their crew. And what was that like? I mean, that must have been pretty intimidating. Well, They'd just come back from Sydney.
So I've literally went in a boat with them only a couple of times, only 2 or 3 times.
But were they welcoming to you?
Oh, yeah, but I was in the club with them, and they were so inspirational to be around, because they were genuine superstars and
global.
Yeah, and I'm good friends with them all now, and Sir Steve is chair of Henley Royal Regatta. Matthew Pinson, he's one of the Henley stewards, and sort of, I was the little boy then, but now I've grown up with them a little bit.
You had football matches with them, do you, sometimes?
Oh, that was quite funny. Yeah. On one of the camps, went with Steve to watch Seville. A big Chelsea fan. And some people in the crowd started noticing it was Steve and started singing "Row, row, rowy boat."
Brilliant. Yeah, I mean, I have actually had the pleasure of meeting Sir Steve once, bumped into him at a supermarket. What an absolute legend. Was it 5 goals he won, wasn't it?
Yeah,
consecutive
and a bronze in the bobsleigh.
Yeah.
No, he was an amazing guy, and what he had to go through with his health as well, being diabetic.
Yeah.
His last 4 years was incredible. What he had to battle and what he went through. Big ambassador for the sport. Now, if it wasn't for that group, the funding that the sport has now. And there's people, athletes now that we might move on to that are making, they can actually live with a being paid as a grant.
Yeah.
And the facilities we have, GB Training Centre, Caversham Lake, the facilities we have, the support staff we have, the coaches we have that can make a career out of it, the equipment we have, they're at the beginning of all of it. Because they were the trailblazers in 1996 that got the only gold medal for Great Britain out of all the sports.
Yeah.
And that's when people really started to look and go, oh, what is this sport of rowing? A bit like curling, right? In the Winter Olympics, everyone turns into curling fans.
Yeah.
I think when the Olympics comes around, people know rowing, and it's because of them and their amazing work they did.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of interesting if you think about rowing, because it's one sport where almost as a country we've got everything you need to do it.
Yeah.
So I guess, because I was just thinking then, I wonder what it was that flipped it over. In '96, what was that thing that turned it into what it became? But I guess ultimately it's just very committed people.
I think it was actually '96, the demise of all the other sports.
Right.
Demise is too strong a word. Sorry, but no other sports got a medal. And the rowers, they were up there, but they were always up there. Steve had won 5, so he had already, going into it, being an Olympic champion, and Matthew was an Olympic champion as well. But he just had the eyes of the world around him. And then, and when he won that medal, with all the eyes around him, he famously quoted, "Oh, if you see me near a boat again, shoot me. I do not want to do this again." I think that really captured the nation, really, that this guy is a human being, and he'd had enough of it. But then very quickly after a holiday, he thought, oh, maybe Sydney might be good. And then they made a documentary about it. And that was really done, So that wasn't really done then. And now you have the All or Nothing, Drive to Survive documentaries now, which you can't look on your Netflix or Amazon without seeing a documentary. We didn't have many of them back then. I think there was the Rugby Lions tour documentary, and then there was this one about Steve Redgrave doing his rowing, and it was cool, and it was really raw footage. It was, so remember in the changing rooms, you just walk in and James Cracknell would be sitting with a camera recorder in the corner, and you just give the reels to the guy, and they made it. It was, there wasn't a film crew in there. They just had a little camera recorder each, and it was. I still look back on those times. It was a pretty cool time to be around. I'm not sad at any decisions I made, because I got to hang and be with those guys.
Yeah, I mean, wow. But that was just an amazing experience. And obviously the impact that then had, inspiring a nation from Sydney 2000 up to London 2012. I mean, it's huge, wasn't it? It must have been at its peak in London 2012 in terms of rowing.
Yeah, so rowing is just... we're so fortunate, and we've got fantastic coaches, we've got facilities. And my club, Leander, our remit is to get people into the national team. Now, that's what we do. Henley Royal Regatta is the most famous rowing race, bar the boat race, and it's in Henley, and our rowing club is in Henley. So obviously, winning Henley Royal Regatta is a very, very big priority for Leander. But getting people to make the Olympic Games is bread and butter. We are an elite setup. We're a high performance centre, and we are set up to try and make people win the Olympics, because the Olympics is as good as it gets in rowing. We've got 138 Olympic medals to date in the club, and everything about the club is set up to try and, if an athlete has the potential, what can we do to support that athlete to get there? And not for the club's gain, for that person's gain. And so my job at the moment, I'm the assistant men's coach at Leander, and my boss, Matt Beachy, is the head men's coach. So my job is I do the recruitment, which shouldn't be taken lightly. So I obviously work very closely with local schools, and if there's rowers in those schools that have got the potential to go on through, they know about the steps they can possibly take. If they wanted to do a gap year after school, then Leander offer a gap year, and I lead that gap year process. I'm the coach for those guys, and I really enjoy that, because my previous job, I worked in schools for 15 years, and moving to coach seniors, I absolutely love working with seniors, don't get me wrong, but there is a real fun aspect, and there's this innocent just enjoyment out of putting a child in the boat for the first time, a boy or girl, and you see their face and they go home and say, I loved that was amazing, I want to go again, when can I go again? And so I always hold those memories really high. But now working in the high performance aspect, I thought those days were sort of gone. But I do the gap year program, and it's young kids coming out of school, and I still really push for them to fall in love with the sport more, because they do sport because maybe that's what they did at school. But those with potential, I try and teach them to really love what they do. Don't just do it because they've been told to do it. Really enjoy it, and I think that gap year program, just teaching them a bit about life. They're rowing. So as the stories I've just told you about rowing with the superstars when I was a kid, these guys are doing that now. They do the gap year, and they're rowing in Leander, and they've got their new superstars, and they're rowing alongside, and they just learn from them. Every day is a bit like what I just said. Watching the superstars train, they learn from them. I work very, very closely with universities, British and American. I go out to the States and I network with the American universities, and I can talk to them about the athletes we have in our gap year program, about what have they got to get for you to accept them into your programs. So I turn up with a list of, I've got these rowers, these are pretty good, and in return, what, how many Brits have you got out here, and when are they graduating? So I work very closely with them through university, and then when they graduate, 4 years in America or 3 years in this country, when they graduate, they come to Leander, and we try and harness that potential even more. I want to be really respectful to the school coaches and the university coaches as well, because it could be perceived that Leander are, taking all their hard work and saying, look, we've made an Olympian. It's not that. To make every Olympian, there's probably 4 or 5 coaches that have done their part to do it. And Leander is just the place where we might come to put literally the cherry on top of the cake. They're already fantastic. They've learned their competition from school. They've learned their psychology from a fantastic coach they've had at university, or their technical skills from a fantastic junior coach. And they're really coming to us just to get that last bit of competitive training, high performance level, maybe just do a little bit more training, because we haven't, at Leander, we don't have the distraction of handing in an acetate, got to do their exam, they've got to do their degree. So with us, there's just a little bit more time to get the quality right and eat the right food, rest a bit in the afternoon before the third training session. And then they're with us for two, maybe 3 years. We train them up, and then we'll give them to the Great Britain national team. Then the Great Britain national team coaches will do the last bit to get them, usually, to win gold medals. And the Great Britain Olympic team is very strong, and we cross our fingers for Paris, but we've got an incredibly strong team of men and women going out to Paris that hopefully will do us all proud.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what when in your recruitment process, you mentioned there, what are the key attributes you look for? I think you touched on some of those. Obviously, it's the timing, the ability to row, but there must be so much more to it.
And by the way, just in addition, just without segueing too much, what was your attribute? What were the attributes you had? Because you mentioned a few things earlier, but
typically rowers. I hate going with this point, because there is so much more to a rower than this point, but it's an elephant in the room that they've got. It's to be pretty big and strong. You can do it without being big and strong. As you're looking at me now, I'm 5'10", and I was only weighing 75 kilos and 80 kilos. But really, if you want me to draw you a picture of an Olympic champion, it's 90 to 100 kilos.
Right.
Eat comfortably over 6 foot, arms very long, legs very
so 90
long.
90 kilos is what, 15 and a bit stone, what is that? No, like 16 stone.
Pretty big and strong. And on the women's side, I don't work so closely with the women's squad, but relatively you probably 85 kilos or something, very, very strong. And not just those things do not make an Olympic champion. Right. So I could walk around the village that we're in now, and I could see a guy who's 6 foot. That doesn't make him able to be an Olympic champion. But so when you've got those attributes, you've also got to be a fierce competitor. You've got to have that screw loose in terms of endurance, because it's really funny. Rowing is a sport of 2,000 metres, which is predominantly done between 5.5 and 6.5 minutes. That is an endurance sport, would you believe? That is an endurance sport. And the reasons being is you go at such a high intensity that the more training you do, the less fatigued you'll be from probably 4 minutes to 5 minutes. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the more training you do, you're going to improve your fitness levels to keep going. So for the first half of the race, it's going to be pretty close. But the second half of the race, that's when people are going to flag. So we train, the more miles we do a lot of miles at steady heart, 160 heart rate, 150.
I was going to say, is that sort of where you get into anaerobic and aerobic?
Yeah. So we do a huge amount of base training. So the guys, So a typical day for a rower, we're talking an Olympic rower, would probably be something like 2 hours, 160 in the morning, have some breakfast, an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours again, then do probably weights in the afternoon. Some days, there could even be a fourth session. So it's just a huge volume of training. And then the next day it could be even, the long sessions and working in the correct heart rate zones. But it's really funny, isn't it, that all of that training is to produce it over 5.5 to 6.5 minutes in August or whatever in summer.
Going back to Pete's question on the attributes, the reason I actually asked about you is because you mentioned to me once you've got massive lungs. I just wanted to get that in there. But could you do a series of metrics, for example, with an individual, take a guy off the street and sort of see some...
I think there is a school of thinking that you could go around to universities, etc., and you could do some scientific testing and find the next one. But that's not me. I
really like that's not the case in a way.
Yeah, I mean,
because obviously you can't bottle the mindset as well.
No. Yeah, you definitely can. There's this initiative now, and it was World Class Start, and it was basically go in somewhere, find someone big, and test them on a few attributes and give them some funding, and they could be the next Olympic champion. And now there is proof that can happen. There is. So there's definitely a framework for there, finding somebody with the right length, arms, legs, lungs, and going, right, we're just going to train you. But I don't think you can train the mindset. So maybe they test 100 people, maybe 1 or 2 make it. I guess it's even less odds than that. But rowing, it's that the third 500, as I spoke about, when it gets really, really tough, that you can't teach that bit, and you've got to get pretty tough, and there's a certain amount of talent in there as well.
So the mindset is rare, you say, but it's innate. I guess you can't teach it. It's either there or it's not. Even if you're a big specimen, you look like your physical attributes for rowing, but that mindset is key between gold and
yeah. I mean, I'm probably not explaining this very well. The talent aspect. We're talking about the top 1%, 2%. That's the talent. I mean, I was talented, but I'm nothing compared to some of the guys now that are doing it, and that's honest. That's not just being humble. I used to be quite good, but when you see someone really talented, I guess it's a bit like when you see a Ronaldo on the block and you go, "Oh, I thought I was good, but that guy's amazing."
Yeah.
And it goes, and some of the guys in the Olympic team now, there's no comparison to what I used to do in them. They are superstars. And we're talking about that 1%. And then on top of them being that 1%, they're also very strong. And they're also got the levers we talked about. And they're also fierce competitors. So you've got to have the 3 or 4 things. There's no one thing. Yeah, we mentioned about the lung capacity and stuff. I don't know whether I've got that bigger lungs. Maybe I just did sport for so long in endurance stuff that my VO2 max and stuff was pretty good compared to somebody else. But there's no one thing in rowing. You've got to have quite a few things. But then on top of all of it in rowing, can you actually row, and can you row technically quite well? Because there's a lot of superstars who they're amazing. They tick every box, but they're a bit clumsy in rowing, and they don't let the beautiful side of the sport, the being at one with water and that crispness of letting the boat run. Every time you take a rowing stroke, essentially you slow the boat down because you put the oar in the water and you take a stroke. So the aim is that you take a stroke and you don't slow the boat down. And that's something that's what I spend hours and hours and hours of every day trying to get the strength and the power with the elegance of don't slowing the boat down.
Amazing. Because when I was actually going to ask you, when you say talent, because I've done some rowing in terms of on a concept 2 or whatever, and had a guy talk to me about insanely small amounts of technique. And it was very counterintuitive. I remember when he told me some of the basic elements, but that's what I have no depth of understanding or no insight into actually what does talent mean outside of the physics of rowing. I don't know that. So that's really interesting. That sort of, even what you just said there is fascinating because I had no idea. Because it's sort of, I guess the difference is it's not running. It's not like a running race where there really isn't technique. There's a technique to your strategy, but actually rowing makes it quite unique in a way. I suppose cycling, you could argue there's stroke length and cadence and all that stuff. But I guess with rowing, what you're saying is actually it really is a combination of masses of technique. You could have all the physical attributes and the mindset, but if you don't have the talent for the technique,
then you got to be coachable. You got to be a team player. Rowing is the epitome of team sport. It's such a cheesy line, but we're all in the same boat together. We've got to work together. It is, if you've got one guy in the front of the boat who thinks that he's better than everyone else on the boat, and why am I doing rowing with you guys? That's not going to work. That's not the right dynamics. Only yesterday I had a meeting with my Leander boys, and we've just done a bit of testing, and we're talking about moving the squad, not just individuals now. We've done that individual bit, so they've sort of been put into a group of you're all probably going to get in, maybe one or two not, but and I've said to them, look, we have to start working now as a team rather than individuals. We have to start looking after each other. And what I mean by looking after each other is, you've got a responsibility. If you've got a guy that walks in the gym and he's a bit down on himself because yesterday he didn't do very well, well, it's kind of your responsibility to go and have a word, listen to him, and try and help him. Because actually, it's going to affect your result. So not only because you're a good person, you don't want somebody to be down. You want to go and I think that's really important in rowing. And I think that's definitely something that I've taken through life. I'm always somebody that if I see someone's down, I will get in contact with them maybe later that night and go, look, you're right, you seemed a bit...
But one of the things I've noticed about you, and I didn't say this at the beginning, we've known each other a bit longer than you've known Pete. But one of the things I've noticed about you, we met at we got chatting at our kids' football environment. And there's me pulling my hair out, saying, what's he doing that for? But you were always incredibly measured. I always noticed that. You were always very, very positive. You're always like, no, he's doing fantastic. And I'm guessing this is bled into life or even parenting.
Well, Ben is fantastic. He scored some amazing goals last week. And you definitely shouldn't have been pulling your hair out because he's awesome.
I was in the car today, so... but no, yeah.
Don't get me wrong, I have my moments. No one teaches you to be a dad, right? I remember my eldest Alfie going and doing some stuff at Wycombe Wanderers. And I think we got in the car after one training session... And he said to me, Dad, are you annoyed with me? And I was like, well, I just thought that you should have done. And then as soon as it came out of my mouth, I went, whoa, that's not the sort of dad I want to be.
Right.
And I quickly went, right, let's go and get a milkshake and let's just have a laugh.
And I don't want to segue too much, but do you well, I suppose it overlaps, right, with your athletes, the job you do. I mean, so we had Scott in here, who was a Wycombe Wanderers guy. He was a pro goalkeeper, and we got some really interesting insights into pro sport, which actually I think could put a lot of people off, the way that you treated on the journey. And I think what's really nice to hear in a sport like yours, which obviously is hyper competitive, like you said, you're at the sharp end, the sharp end. You're getting kids and adults ready for elite sport. But it's really nice to hear you talk about this sort of mindset support and environmental support. It's also making me think that I'm too hard on Ben, which we've talked about a lot, but I wrestle with. Is how do you, when you're a dad and you're trying to get that mindset across. But it's really good to hear, I think, with your athletes, and you've mentioned it before, that there's that protection, there is that sort of...
Yeah, I mean, it's look, the world's changing, right? I'm learning every day things that you say you don't do. You've got to be careful what you say and do, and your actions speak 1,000 words. So, and at the moment, I think the young kids I'm working with, and that's from 18 with a gap year, but even the guys in their mid-20s, they've got a lot going on in their lives, and there's much more mental health issues than there ever was. I don't remember anyone talking about mental health when I was younger. I mean, talk about what I just said right at the beginning. I lost 15 kilos over a summer. I was not all right, but there's and it's wonderful that there is now a forum and there's confidence enough to say that now, because and so I think Matt Beachy and I running the men's squad, we have to be definitely much more available for them to listen, because it's life's tough, and we're only trying to do rowing, and it is only rowing, and ultimately we're trying to do it to a good level, but it is still only rowing. Life and other stuff is much more important, life and family, and so you've got to take stuff in, keep it all in perspective, because we're just trying to move a boat a bit faster than another boat, and it feels awful if we don't do it, but actually 10 minutes later we'll go, right, we'll do it next time. And I think as long as you keep perspective on what you're trying to do, then you keep moving in the right direction. But I didn't really talk earlier about, so I worked with schoolboys so I retired quite early because I realised I was flogging a dead horse a bit. So I retired, but I had so much motivation and love of the sport. So I wanted to get more people into the sport, just be an ambassador for the sport, getting more kids loving rowing. So I actually became head of rowing at Sir William Borlase, which is the local school to us. If anyone's listened to it who's not local, it's in Marlow. And and that was really cool.
And that's a comprehensive?
No, grammar.
It is a grammar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but it doesn't have a lot of money, and the equipment there was pretty old, and that was such an amazing 2 to 3 years of my life. Just realising that I wanted to be a rowing coach, first of all, because you don't know. I'm thinking, right, this is really what I wanted to do. And we turned a group of I think there was about 7 or 8 kids rowing when I took over. And when I left 3 years later, I think we had won across the board over the few years, like 9 national medals. And they were racing at Henley Royal Regatta, and they hadn't been for ages. And
brilliant.
It's just amazing. I loved how happy they all were. We'd go to a race and they'd be trying to rock the minibus and doing all stuff that we just brilliant. As a coach, you're driving the minibus and you're listening to their chatter in the back, and it's just they're having the best time. It was boys and girls, and they were just having the best time, and they were loving rowing.
How did you get them excited about it in the first place? Come along and let's have a talk about rowing.
Look, if it hasn't conveyed, I'm quite an excitable person. I just get them in, we're going to do it. It's going to be amazing. This is going to be the best thing ever. We come up, if it's just a normal Wednesday, and I think the kids look a bit down, I'd be like, guys, do you realise what day it is? This is Mega Wednesday, and this is Ultimate Smackdown Wednesday, and we're going to put you into teams, and this is going to be the biggest competition you will ever. They're going to be talking about this for days. For years, they're going to talk about this Wednesday where we're going to go toe to toe. So you've got 20 minutes to go apart, and you've got to go and get your strategy. You've got to get your team name. And we're going to come together and we're going to have a massive race. And look, whether that happened or not, that's just me going off on one. But we'd make every day really fun, and we just try and trick them into training really hard, but loving it. Yeah. And then I moved to Bedford Modern School, and I did another stint there with completely the same logic. It was a school that wasn't where it aspired to be, and we won quite a lot of national medals, got people into that, and that was the time I actually started to get people into the Junior World Championships and stuff like that. So what I was doing, I was starting to coach people to get there, and actually from that Borlase group that I said, one of the guys there went to the Olympics. So little boy there, John O'Clegg, he's a grown up now. Very proud of him. He was the first person that I coached that's gone on, raced at Olympic Games and stuff.
Fantastic.
So all this fun, sorry to swear, pissing about, it's got reason.
By the way, the footballer we were talking about, you can swear as much as you want.
Yeah. But like, I guess you're just teaching people it's okay to have fun. Yeah. Like, being successful isn't being miserable, and you can have so much fun. And I do that now with the rowers. We try and make it fun. So every night, if any of my rowers are listening to this, probably going to laugh. Every night I send a message to the group saying what training is the next day. And I will always go, "Good evening, legends," or whatever, or just put an emoji of a beaver at the bottom or something. Yeah. I just make them laugh. And I don't portray myself as being, I don't take myself too seriously. I don't really care what people think of me as long as they think I'm a good egg and I'm trying to do something good for them.
Well, you can see the passion comes across clearly. But I was thinking as you were talking there about Matthew Syed, who was, I think he was an Olympic table tennis player. And I think in one street in London where they had the coach, there were 2 or 3 people that actually went on to play in the Olympics at table tennis because of that one coach. And it plays such a significant part in getting people excited about it.
There are so many. I don't have them readily, but urge listeners to look it up. There are so many examples of really, really successful sports people coming from one little school.
Yeah.
And I think there's examples in tennis, and there's actually it's something to do with Andy Murray, isn't it? The Murray.
He was Dunblane, wasn't he?
But then out of that school came quite a few successful sports people. Anyway, so
I should know this. I can't remember the. I know.
But
I know the story
not just
loosely.
tennis.
Yeah,
and there's no link to it. Why should 4, maybe 5 international superstar athletes come from one school?
Yeah,
that's not genetic. That's just and they say it was because the PE teacher was so motivational, and they made them believe it was possible.
Was also, I mean, I think people gravitate towards it, right? It's, you look at even our lads are both at Chris Fraser, who actually I'm desperate to get onto the podcast if we can. But,
yeah, definitely, he'd be good.
Yeah, I think he would be. But again, it's like it's sort of people are like, oh yeah, you've got to go there. And sort of you start to just have this hunch, don't you, or this gut feel. But I think also what it sounds like you're doing is much more almost mentorship as opposed to coaching as well. It seems that there's a real element of that, in terms of, because I think, again, my experience with tennis, I was only a county player, but I'll never forget I was 11 and it wasn't fun. And it was... I'll never forget the day was just like, it was quite stressful. The guy just had a really bad, I won't mention his name, but it's scarred in my brain. And I did my county sort of trial assessment. And then he wrote on my feedback, he said, "How good does Adam want to be?" I've never forgotten it. And I'm like, I don't know, I'm 11. And it's like, how good can I be? But there wasn't any of this kind of... It's been a thing of mine about English sport in general. It's a case of that there's almost this sort of slight... I think you said it really well. It's like... It's almost like you're not allowed to have fun. It's almost like this sort of bravado wrapped around it. This sort of kind of... If you can't work it out on your own, then you're not good enough. And I don't really... It doesn't sound like you agree with that. And I don't really get that, especially at school. And again, a lot of coaches that I've spoken to, it's like, just make it fun. Just make it fun. So I don't know what you think about that, but it's kind of...
Yeah, I think it's, completely think it's nonsense. You just got to enjoy what you do. Your kids, just enjoy it. And by just the repetition of doing the sport, maybe because I understand the sport, and I did understand the sport when I was teaching these young kids, I give them a framework to do, but there was a hidden meaning that we were actually getting better without knowing it, because we were training the right things, we were doing the right things, we were training at the right intensity. But it was definitely not a scientific approach. Right now, we are working with a much more scientific approach. We're training in the right zones, and, we're managing. So I'm trying to get them working with Beachy at Leander, we're trying to get them to make the Olympic team where they can hold their own, doing hundreds of miles in the training week, 3, maybe 4 sessions a day, sometimes not having a day off for a month. We're trying to make them durable to do that training. And so right now, the realms we're at, we deal with a lot of students that have just come back from university, real flair people. They've come back from having scholarships at Yale, Harvard, Oxford, well, not scholarships at Oxford and Cambridge, but the British universities. And they've been doing really well, but they've done really well off maybe 1.5 rowing sessions a day, because they're much more about the academics and a busy life at university. So they come to us, and you can't just jump straight onto training 3 times a day because they're not used to it. So that's a big part of what we do. We're trying to teach them. You can't teach them that, but we're gradually trying to build their program. And we work with the physios, they work with the strength and conditioning coaches, and just trying to get all the right muscles right, because it takes time. And you cannot, it sounds cheesy, but you cannot rush that process. As you know, from training for the London Marathon, you can't run it in 2 or 3 weeks. You've got to build it up. And you were in amazing nick the day after the run because you didn't just wing it. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to take our time and do things right, train them right, so when they can go into the national team, they can do it. They're ready for it. And that's what the Leander program is about, is getting and teaching them about the testing they'll do. There's different ways you can test, different ways of selection. We just try and teach them about it. So it's like an academy for the Olympic team.
Just quick on the on the marathon thing, what I found really interesting, you talked about kind of building up resilience over time. And you saw it with a couple of miles out, people were dropping like flies left, right and centre. And you could see maybe they're not put, a lot has to go right on the day, but a lot of people that are pulling up, stretching, they hadn't done the endurance stuff properly, or maybe they just flagged at the wrong time. I don't know, but it's quite interesting. And you talk about with rowing, the ability to keep going with endurance and slow down, after everyone else.
I mean, anyone I saw walking, I thought, fair play, they beat me to this point. True. But then it's just a little bit more ingrained in not stopping and stuff. But respect, everyone's got their ways of doing it, and everyone's fighting their own battles. You can't look at one person and say, look, that's silly, they're walking. Well, they might have gone to halfway in 1:22. There might be a reason. They might have, they may have come out of some treatment for the last. Like everyone's got their own battles, and I learned not to judge and just respect what they're doing. We'll always keep coming back to London Marathon because it's amazing, but the support for the London Marathon was insane. Every person that was cheering, it was like they knew me. They knew you, and I found that very inspirational, that I want to care for other people as much as they did, because they really helped me get through it, because I was having a pretty crap time. And everyone, I had my name on my top, and everyone's, go on, Ali. And then one person will hear it and go, Ali, and they'll go, Ali, Ali, Ali. I heard it all the time.
Brilliant. Well, I was even getting go Ali's, for those that don't know, halfway through there's a belief booster, so your followers could send you a message halfway through, so you see it on a big board, go on Pete, you're doing really well, and I missed it halfway around, but you get an email afterwards saying, these are all your messages of support from the big day. So I was looking through, had messages from my wife and my kids, fantastic. And then there's one that just said, Ali Brown, Ali Brown, Ali Brown, from our mutual friend who sent the wrong message. So that was pretty funny. But so we're sitting here now, we're coming into May in a couple of days. So the Olympics in Paris is months out now. So how are you feeling about your guys that are going into?
Yeah, well, they're actually competing at the European Championships this weekend, and I do a lot of the social media for Leander as well. So I'm busy tweeting and sharing on Instagram every few minutes that it's another gold. So the Great Britain team is really strong. We're in a really fantastic position. Got some really great feeders out there of strong universities and clubs, And the rowing is definitely on the up. 4 years ago, it wasn't quite so successful on the Olympics final weekend, but I think that some positive changes have happened, and there's definitely a new cohort in there of fresh, talented athletes that are really exciting for the future. And I know that if we get it right in Paris, which, look, I wish everyone the best of luck, and I'm sure the legends will do it. But there's a really good group for the next one as well, and that's what currently Matt Beachy and I are working with now. We have the honour, as it actually, to be working with the kind of label Project LA, and they're really exciting. And Leander are having a really good year. We've won quite a lot domestically because we've got this really exciting group in there. So the future's bright as well. It's not just about Paris. There's a really strong group coming through.
That sounds fantastic. And who should we be looking out for when we're watching the Olympics on TV in terms of our chances for gold?
Okay, so we've got the men's pair, which is Tom George and Ollie Wynne-Griffiths. They've just become European champions today. They're like the big top boys in a pair. The men's 8 haven't lost now for 3 or 4 world championships. Wow. They're red hot. They're really good. And the 8 is the blue ribbon event. It's usually the last race of the Olympic regatta because it's the fastest moving boat. That's why it's called the blue ribbon event. And they're really good. They've just won again today. We've got scullers. I predominantly work with sculling, so that's when you've got 2 oars instead of 1. The men's quad, they're doing pretty well right up there. The women's 8 is really strong, coached by my good mate Rich. He's doing a great job there. The women's 4 is really, really strong as well. They've just won, and the women's quad are current world champions as well. And there's a lightweight women's double, which is a fantastic boat. They were world champions as well. So I'm sure I've missed someone, but by the sheer me just reeling them off goes to show that, if we get them all, that's unbelievable. Can you imagine if we got all of those? That's like 5 or 6 gold medals. The para 4 really, really strong as well. It's incredible. And if we get it right, and we've just come back from the first World Cup. There's a World Cup series, and Great Britain were on the top of the medal podium in that. So as a nation, we're right up there. So it's really exciting. And so the last few years I've worked with the under 23 team. So that's me coaching the Great Britain under 23s at the World Championships. It's a great honour because it's working with the future talent basically. And we go to these World Championships and Great Britain, we're just winning loads of stuff. So these kids, they're growing up winning. They go to a World Championships, they're not fazed by it, they just win. And I guess if you're joining a team, it's a bit like, the young kids in Man City, or I wish it was Man United, but they just go, well, I'm just going to win because that's all I've known.
This is ingrained into their psyche.
Yeah. Almost, so the young kids think I'm in the Great Britain rowing team. That'll probably mean I win, right?
But I mean, because on that, and coming back to what we were saying about kids and the mindset stuff, keeping it fun. Obviously, there has to come a point where it flips, and it's like we're at the sharp end. But it sounds to me that what Britain's done is it's got a really underlaying infrastructure. Whether it's through even international universities, but it sounds like there is a real base that you just you can't create that overnight.
Yeah. Well, we're very fortunate because rowing's quite a British sport, English, it's
sort of heritage.
Yeah. The big schools like Eton, Shiplake, St Paul's, Radley, these schools have got money. And these schools have got a rowing team. And so, but you don't have to be in one of those schools to make it. And then look at the shift out that we've got Oxford and Cambridge, the boat race in this country. There's huge heritage with rowing, but there is a lot of kids coming from other sources now. I mean, I came from a little club. I was far from those public schools. It's very, very different. And a lot of people now, there is money going into these smaller clubs, and they're getting amazing opportunities. And we touched on it. I work a lot with getting the scholarships into these universities, and it's amazing if you're talented and you speak to the right people and you get yourself known to the right people. There's opportunities for something as so simple as pulling a rowing oar, and that's what I tell my kids. Just whatever you do in life, just do it as hard as you can.
That was my next question, actually, is how the young Browns are coming. Are they coming into rowing at all, or is it there's a bit of pressure from the history?
I think Alfie might do a Marlow Rowing Club rowing summer course next year, and just see whether he likes it.
Yeah.
Ted is a bit of a tearaway. He's into his rugby. Tearaway's wrong. He's only 10, but like he loves the contact of. He's covered in bruises from rugby and stuff.
I always say this to Ali. Playing football, he's like a classic. For me, he's like a classic number 9, like a big English number 9 who's just going to bully you all day long.
Brilliant.
Yeah, he won a little trophy today. I was very, very proud of him. He got most improved at his Chinner Rugby Club,
Fantastic.
Which is really cool because I guess it's sort of in part of what we're saying, because I never pushed him to do it. We've been really, the older one, Alfie, he's always been super talented, and he's always, man of the match and this, and scored a worldie and all that. And Ted,
super athlete.
And Ted's always just been there, and I quietly wondered whether, okay, well, maybe if I've got one kid that loves sport and the other one's not that into it, can't win them all. But Ted's quietly, I thought he was asleep the other night, and I heard some noises coming from his room. I opened the room and he was going, 28, 29, and he's doing press-ups. And I was like, you should be in bed, but I love that, Ted. I love that.
Yeah.
But I was trying to get into this a bit with some of the earlier questions. Is I talk about this a lot with my family. Is that sort of drive piece, and that kind of, where does it come from? And it's I don't know if I'll ever figure it out or ever work it out, but it's, why is it that with rowing, right, I'm sure you've seen a ton of it, that there's a load of kids probably got a bag of potential, or let's put it into football terms, Ravel Morrison, whatever his name was, absolute, just
all the talent in the world.
What is it that, okay, with him it's obvious because he clearly didn't have the environment, but I'm just fascinated in how is it that you get that 1%, that 0.5%, that, how do you ingrain that? And again, I don't think we'll figure that out today, but I don't know.
I don't think I'm going to figure it out. And, if I come across in any of this is preaching like I know, I don't. I'm just fortunate enough to do a sport I love and I'm really passionate about. But when it comes to the sport that we're talking about, I think you don't go much further from just work ethic. The kid that, if you've got, as we've discussed, you tick about 4 boxes: the talent, the size, the strength. When it comes to but you're going to sit in an Olympic final, right? Or more relevant to. I've been fortunate enough to coach the last 3 years, winning Henley Regatta, and you sit on the start of that final. Well, you look to the left or the right, and you're going to see a crew as committed as you, as strong as you, as big as you. They want to win it as much as you. Well, then its gloves are off. Just go for it. And I guess the better crew will win, but you're talking small margins. And if you're still side by side, coming through the big grandstand, which is called stewards, well then it's not who's better anymore, because you've proved yourself you're about the same. It's just let's go. Let's have it. And it's the last who can. So there's a really cool phrase I like in rowing, and I reckon you probably could apply it to any other thing. So it's called, we just say, keep your hand in the flame. All right. So the logic behind that is, say you've got a candle on the table. Guess what I used to play with my brothers as a kid, right? so all right, who can hold their hand on top of the flame for the longest? Okay, and that is basically what my way I see sport. So at London Marathon last weekend, I was fighting some demons, and I knew that was a day where I had to hold my hand in the flame as long as I possibly could. And you can lighten, you can back off a bit by lifting your hand But obviously the closer your hand to the fire, the faster you're going. So we do that in rowing quite a lot. You've got to ration your energy from start to finish, but you really want to be going as fast as you can all the way through.
It's interesting, isn't it, in a world of hacks and instant gratification, ultimately the lessons we're getting is actually the opposite, right? It's, we're actually teaching almost as much as possible to just almost take the easy way out. And actually really what you're saying is, yeah, okay, you got to have talent, you got to have the physical attributes, but ultimately it's still going to boil to that. It's just going to come down.
Yeah, there's loads of talented people in the world. Yeah, the most talented person ever might be, I don't know, smoking on the corner, like, yeah, because he didn't want to do it. So you've got it's the different components. You've got to be the most talented person, but you've also got to be still wanting it. You've got to be dedicated. You still get your ass out of bed in the morning and go to work. So back in the day, I wrote a little article for a sports magazine, and it was along the line of just, I think it was called Plan B, and it was encouraging, so every little boy, and I'm not just excluding girls here, but like every little boy wants to be the next, the Premier League footballer. And some of these kids are so talented, but actually, was there ever a PE teacher or somebody close to them that tapped them on the shoulder and went, "You are insane at sport, but why don't you try a sport where less people are doing it?" Like, with no disrespect at all, but something like, I don't know, water polo or hockey or just something you might absolutely love it as much, but so many talented kids all just go 100% for football. It's not, I'm just going to drink beer and smoke then. Because everyone's that guy in the pub, and I did it at the beginning of this chat, so I'm laughing at myself. I had trials, I could have made it. Well, yeah, at least I had the foresight to change sport and keep going. But there are so many talented people that just go for the same thing, and actually, there's so much to do out there. You don't have to just go for football and then nothing else.
That's what I love about the Olympics. You're watching sport that you don't see for 4 years, and you're getting into it, and you're fully behind them on the TV. But it's fascinating to see people on those journeys.
I wonder about the top % of people in this country that just think that the top % of the country. I'm sure I'm not going to upset somebody by saying this, but I don't. But there's just this infatuation with playing football. Yeah. I mean, it's Sunday lunchtime now, and I've spent my whole morning watching children play football. Yeah. And it's just, in this country, you have to play football. And all the best kids in the school are playing football. And, there's some other sports out there as well that they just might absolutely blossom in and go to an Olympic Games one day.
It's too many hands for the Flames, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And talking of Flames, your Sunday lunch is going to be in flames soon. If we
it is.
So, but yeah, that's been an amazing insight, I think, into elite sport. So thank you for taking the time.
My pleasure.
And maybe we can catch up again after the Olympics and see.
That would be very cool. Yeah, no, I think what I've really taken from today is number one, and we didn't really get into questioning about it, but I think it's a great example of, obviously you got incredibly far, but you turned that passion and talent and spirit into clearly what you were born to do, which was coach and mentor and again, I think knowing a family member who's done the same thing, I just love that. It's just amazing story to hear. But I think also as well, I think it's a good message, I'm taking from this is, you're dealing with really talented people, really, I wouldn't say a lot of the work's been done for you, but, you're kind of coming in at that point to turn them into that 1% or 0.5%. But also, it seems to me the mindset that you're applying is obviously, you wouldn't be getting people in the Olympics if it wasn't serious stuff, but with an element of, and I've heard you talk on the phone a couple of times to a couple of your rowers, obviously none of the names, so, nothing, I don't, I've heard your compassion. I've heard sort of the way that you approach it, which I think has been amazing to hear. And I think it is nice, which is that it's that balance of that message, which is you're here to work hard. You know, that mindset has got to be there. That discipline's got to be there. But this doesn't have to be miserable. It's not shit. So yeah, that's what I've taken from this today. Yeah. I think it's a really amazing insight into elite sport.
Yeah, I just think you just got to enjoy life. Just go for it. A lot of fun out there.
Yeah. And final question then, we normally finish on this one, so I'll ask you the same one, Ali, is if you could go back to, based on all the experience that you've had, you know, in coaching and rowing and everything you've learned along the way, if you could go back to 17-year-old Ali, leaving home for the first time and give him one piece of advice, what would that be?
Support City.
Cut! We can't let that out.
No, I definitely don't mean that. I don't know, really. You live by your mistakes, don't you? I don't know that I've made many mistakes, but I've made a career out of my hobby. I've made a career out of my passion, and every day I go to work, I'm happy to go to work. I actually feel like I've never really worked a day in my life because I've cheated the system, really. But I definitely know that I'm not finished yet. I want to make a bigger impact on the sport that I love and more young athletes coming through.
Well, I think that's a great answer, by the way.
That's probably the best answer I've ever heard.
And I think the fact that, you know, your passion shines through, your love for the sport, and your face lights up when you talk about it. So the fact that you're fully immersed in that world, I think, you know, on a day-to-day basis and coaching people to fulfil their dreams as well is magnificent. So well done. And thanks for sharing it with us today. Really enjoyed the chat.
And I think what an answer for this podcast. You know, there's another way. You know, because the background of this was really based on exactly what you said. If we can get everybody thinking that I haven't done a job, I haven't done a day's work in my life, not because you're not committed, not because you're not ambitious or driven, but not enough people are doing that. Do you know what I mean? How many people are spending 20, 30 years getting to 40, 45, 50? What the fuck have I done with my time? Or what have I done with my life? So I think that's such an amazing answer. So thanks.
Cool. Loved it.
Thanks, mate.
No, my pleasure.
Wicked.